So before we actually read our text today, let your imagination take over a little bit and go on a journey with me. I'd ask you to visualize yourself. You're out traveling, walking from place to place with your new friend and leader, Jesus. Walking, of course, you have your walking stick. Think about that. You can carry that hand in hand along the way. You are very excited and pleased. Jesus has made you one of his disciples. You and the other guys are now traveling with him. He has been giving powerful speeches. The people across Galilee and beyond are gathering to hear him speak and to experience his healing. This is amazing stuff. And you, a simple fisherman, are part of this insider group. You've heard about when John the Baptist baptized him in the River Jordan. You were there, of course. You weren't there, of course. But you heard from others how God spoke his approval. God spoke right out loud. You heard about the time in the wilderness, fasting 40 days and 40 nights, being tempted by the devil. And you heard about his kick-butt responses and the victory over the devil. Now Jesus takes your group up a mountain to speak just to the guys and give more than he is giving to the crowds. The significance of the mountain is not lost on you, no sir. This is more than just a way to get away from the crowds. We know from temple writings that this sets up a connection between Jesus and Moses. Moses ascended Mount Sinai after Israel's redemption from Egypt. And Moses saw the promised land from atop Mount Nebo before his death. Even in the Psalms we hear in the temple, they referred to the mountain as a dwelling place of God. You may be getting a little bit out of breath from the climb, but then Jesus stops right there on the side of the mountain, sits down and gives us what later will be recorded by Matthew as what we call the Sermon on the Mount. An instructive but long list of do's and don'ts that is astounding as it is challenging. This is very different, very much more challenging than what he has been telling the people down on the plains. But remember, here is how his sermon started. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little journey, walking with Jesus, walking up the mountain. In this text, Jesus starts out teaching his closest followers, the disciples, and ultimately us, with the Beatitudes. Starts with this upside down system of who is being blessed, saying you are blessed no matter what your condition. You have heard these, you are hearing these statements at the front end of his sermon. Here they are, the identifiers of discipleship, characteristics of the faithful, attributes of believers. They are truth-telling. They name our blessings, but also what is at stake in those blessings. And note that being blessed, as you are, is not just for the sake of the potential joy in the life hereafter, but also for the sake of making it through that which we will find difficult right now. Again, these are Jesus' first words to his disciples. We need to hear in each one of these Beatitudes what is at stake for Jesus and for his ministry. Jillian Engelhardt does a wonderful job of characterizing each of these Beatitudes. And I will rely heavily on her recent words and descriptions. But beware, to do so, we must accept that some of the words used had a significantly different meaning at the time Jesus spoke. So be cautious. Do not jump into our using current understandings of words too quickly. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Read the poor in spirit as those who lack, who are materially deprived and therefore worn down by the plight of poverty. They are those whom society has left behind, who break their backs to make ends meet, who struggle for basic survival, that survival that crushes their spirits. Jesus says theirs is the kingdom of heaven, for there will be no poor in spirit there. God will set things right. No, Jesus is not saying one has to become poor or poor of spirit in spirit, but this statement upsets the notion, the conventional wisdom of the time, that being poor was somehow a deserved action from God. They earned it. God's world does not work that way. On the contrary, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Grief comes to us all, but we can recognize context from when this was written. For example, early mortality rates were higher in the ancient world, much higher. Parents simply could not expect their children to survive infancy, let alone make it to adulthood. Life was not a given. Beyond that, war, food, housing insecurity, and infectious disease could cut life short. And furthermore, on a community scale, people would mourn the loss of their homeland. Remember, Jesus' audience was living under imperial control of the Romans. And the first audience of the gospel would have directly encountered Rome's destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. They were grieved by the violation of their land and sacred space. The promised land was occupied. Yet to those who mourn, both as individuals and as community, Jesus proclaims a comforting, coming comfort. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. We tie back to Psalm 37, verse 11. Here, meek refers to those who are abused by the wicked who seem to prosper by their abuse of others. Here, those abused are called meek. Through the disciples, God reassures the meek that they will be indeed inheriting the earth. Keep in mind, their land was currently claimed and exploited by Rome for the benefit of a few. God's rule will reverse the plight of the meek. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. In the Hebrew Bible, for example, back in Isaiah 51, righteousness refers to a total societal restructuring that includes the equitable distribution of resources. Those who hunger and thirst for this type of righteousness, equitable distribution of resources, then, are those that Rome's unjust practices keep at the margins and at the best at subsistence level. In a reimagined society, all will have enough. Jesus says that in God's kingdom, there will be no need for hunger and thirst, and all will be filled. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Jesus says those who practice mercy, those who give of their resources and care for the outcasts, will receive mercy themselves. In Jesus' day, Rome showed no mercy. Rome violated rules and heavily taxed its population to the point where people had no energy or no resources to resist. God's rule is to be different. In God's kingdom, all will be welcome and will have a shared plenty. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Then and now, the pure in heart are those who follow the will of God in their thinking and doing. Jesus will return to the theme of a person's heart later in his Sermon on the Mount. Suffice it to say that those that commit to God thoroughly, without hypocrisy, will see God. The pure in heart will see God as with an intimate face-to-face encounter. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. In the context of Jesus' time, this one presents a particularly interesting dichotomy. The conquering and ruling Romans claimed and bragged about bringing peace to bear on the country. But of course, Rome's peace came only through domination and submission of the people. In contrast to Rome's approach, in Matthew, peace is beyond the absence of conflict. We know that Jesus is well aware that his message will cause division. Rome subjugated people to their rule through violence and threats of violence. In contrast, God's kingdom is voluntary. No one is coerced into being a disciple. Peacemakers enact not the emperor's will, but God's merciful reign, living together in wholeness and well-being and against any power that hinders or resists it. Blessed are the peacemakers. Reviewing and considering these Beatitudes for us in today's context, one which we live in one of the wealthiest nations in the world that has ever known, but still experience and struggle and mourn and lack mercy, is just as challenging as those words were for the first disciples. How are we to pursue justice, righteousness, and peace? How can we embody God's promises to those that are poor, that mourn, and are oppressed? Perhaps there is a good reason that Jesus put this set of Beatitudes in the front end of his Sermon on the Mount. You think maybe Jesus was saying to us, here is the goal. Here is what it should look like for the kingdom. Well, finally, Jesus has one more beatitude. Blessed are those who are persecuted for justice' sake. When people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Jesus knew, we know, the life of the disciple of Jesus runs counter to the values of the world. It is challenging. Unlike the earlier followers of Jesus, fortunately for us, no one is looking to kill us simply because we confess Christ. Perhaps we do not experience persecution in our modern American context in that same way. But today I think we feel persecuted more by the expression of apathy of others. Do not be deceived. When we live the values outlined in the Beatitudes, the ruler of this world will resist us. The people of this world may well resist us. We must persevere if we are to be blessed. For Jesus said, blessed are those who are persecuted for justice' sake. Well, I hope now you may well understand and appreciate why Jesus started his sermon with the Beatitudes. these challenging expressions of his core beliefs. The heart of the Beatitudes is a call to the disciples who live out the virtues of the blessings in pursuit of righteousness. A righteousness grounded in God's righteousness, grounded in God's steadfast love, goodness, justice, and mercy. It is not enough for us as a church to just repeat the words of God's blessings on the poor and the marginalized. It must also we must also commit to transformative action, to kingdom practices that work for their liberation. Perhaps Prophet Micah had said it best centuries before when he uttered those prophetic words. He says, God has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Amen.